Hello, everyone. This is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of I, the Dragon, Cruel and Beautiful Rabbit Hole, Lore and Frey, and the upcoming Jaw of the Dragon. I've talked a little bit about the Switch 2 and the weird narrative that's kind of propped up among gaming journalists and YouTubers over the past month. Into that the Switch Pro has been retired. The chip shortage has apparently led to this chain of events where Nintendo just chose not to release a new piece of hardware that they had planned since 2017 in order to release a new piece of hardware instead to replace like the replacement to the Switch, which is of course ridiculous if you know anything about like Nintendo's history and how they typically handle success stories like the Switch. I've been making comparisons to the Game Boy and how it was on the market for 11 years before being replaced by the Game Boy Advance, which was, replaced rather quickly by the Nintendo DS. The Game Boy Advance, of course, was introduced to compete with the Wonder Swan. There were like reasons that the Game Boy was replaced. Like it was an antiquated piece of hardware. There was competition for it, so they jumped on the bandwagon, released the Game Boy Advance, and then kind of had to like do this awkward pivot to put out the Nintendo DS as like the proper successor to the Game Boy, which continued its reign. And I think the Switch is going to be like something similar, like that, where like it is going to continue being sold and marketed until some viable piece of hardware comes out to compete with it. And at the moment, there doesn't seem to be anything like that. At the moment, it seems like the only reason people are talking about PlayStation or Xbox at all is because that like they are supposedly the big competitors to Nintendo products, but that's not really true. They're not really competing with Nintendo, not really. Like it's kind of obvious if you're paying attention to this and seeing like the situation unfold, but like it feels if anyone's playing Xbox or PlayStation, it's purely out of force of habit. They are fans of the brand and they're supporting it, and they think that the consoles are going to eventually get games. But I do think there has been like a very noticeable decline in interest from both of them. Xbox in particular suffered like huge losses in sales over the past year because there's just no appeal on the platform anymore. Like they have no focus. Like Phil Spencer spent all this money acquiring all these studios and pushing Game Pass, and what do they have to show for it? Like more and more people are just leaving the Xbox ecosystem. Like PlayStation is not as popular as it used to be. Switch is dominating right now. So my belief has always been that like Nintendo has no reason to replace the Switch at this stage. But like the game journalists, the YouTubers, people like Review Tech USA, like they're talking about how like Switch is has been needed to be replaced since 2017, honestly. Like these guys have been talking about like the inevitable Switch successor right when the console came out. And it really does come off like these guys are like consumerist shills who just want to like upgrade their Nintendo consoles every year, who don't care about software or hardware and like the technology that's still untapped on the Switch. All they care about is like just consuming a new product, consuming the next Nintendo console. And it's really strange to see just how these people like worship the Steam Deck, like as a viable competitor to the Switch. Like I'm the sort of person who talks about how PlayStation and Xbox can't compete with the Switch. Like it's gotten to the point where like I don't even talk about the Steam Deck at all because it's such a nothing burger in the grand scheme of things. Like I can't imagine being so out of touch with reality that you actually think the Steam Deck is in any way relevant when it comes to like a hardware discussion and what we can expect to see going forward. I I don't think Steam Deck is really all that relevant at all. And yet, like people like Rich are painting it as like the Switch killer, even though it's sold less than like the Nokia N-Gage. Like it's just not a relevant platform at all. So the Switch 2 narrative, I think, is going to get like very, very prevalent over the next couple of years. We are like in that awkward transitionary period where these people have been like every year it feels like they release a statement saying that like oh Nintendo is going to release their next piece of hardware this year and that you should hold off on buying that Switch because you can save money and then get the new one when it comes out. I really wonder if they can keep doing this. I really wonder if it's viable for them to keep doing this over and over again because I do think we're kind of at the point where people are getting sick and tired of hearing this. Like it feels like more and more people are starting to pick up on the fact that like the anti-Nintendo propaganda is a real thing. Like it's not just me like screaming at my camera anymore talking about this. It's become kind of like an underground thing where people are like acknowledging this, are acknowledging that like yeah the Switch Pro rumors were fake. Um, like these leakers are frauds. There are all these issues with their statements, but like I don't think people have like put everything together yet. Is that like these people are straight up making things up about Nintendo in order to like turn a profit for themselves. I just realized the other day that like Liam Robertson, the brony behind like the Star Fox Grand Prix rumors, who tried ruining Star Fox Zero's success, who tried like throwing all sorts of wild claims about Nintendo NX into like the internet back in the day. That guy legit has a Patreon where he tells you what he expects to see from Nintendo. Like he will legit try to tell you that he has insider sources at Nintendo and that if you pay him a Patreon fee, he'll tell you about it. That's the kind of situation we're in now. Is that there is an entire industry of people who are making stuff up about Nintendo, and that's a particularly blatant example. I've talked like before about how I think that the people releasing statements about Switch 2 are like trying to manipulate the market price. They're trying to influence the stock market, potentially to make money off of it. They're trying to like steer people towards PlayStation and Xbox. Like there just is this very real conspiracy against Nintendo in this sphere. And I don't know how much longer they can continue denying that it's real if like they're so prevalent and they're so like all encompassing in the sphere. Like I think that's kind of the reason why NeoGAF fell off the radar, right? Is because it was like the most aggressively pro Sony board on the internet, and as a result of that, like Nintendo fans eventually grew fed up with it. And like when the entire thing collapsed, following the evil or sex scandals, people were like celebrating. They were dancing in the streets because NeoGAF had this iron grip on the way that like people discussed video games on the internet. Like when NeoGAF collapsed, suddenly there was a lot more freedom and like what you could talk about, and people wouldn't like steer you towards NeoGAF as an example of like a forum that had like industry insiders telling you how it actually was, like how Yamauchi's family sold all their stocks in Nintendo because they were unhappy with the direction. They wanted out. They didn't want to be part of Nintendo's failure against the market with Sony, like yeah, things like that, things that didn't really make any sense, like the ridiculous claims they came up with were patently absurd. And we are still seeing that today to a certain extent. But more and more, I'm hoping that more and more people start waking up to it. There has when Switch 2 does get announced, when there is a new piece of Nintendo hardware, they'll let you know. Okay, you don't need these leakers to tell you what to expect. Okay, like you don't need them to tell you that like, oh, we might get a Metroid Prime remaster this year. Like just wait until the announcement. Okay? There is no reason to listen to these people whatsoever.